Hello and welcome to the Western Association for College Admission Counseling Virtual College Fair. This is our panel, FAFSA, CSS, and Financial Aid, How Does It Work? Thank you for joining us today. A few housekeeping announcements before we get started. Your camera and microphone are off, so the panelists cannot see or hear you. You can, though, use the Q&A button to ask your questions to our panelists to answer throughout the presentation. Also, know that this is just one of many sessions that are happening as a part of the Western Association for College Admission Counseling College Fair. We hope you'll sign up for more presentations. This panel and all presentations are being recorded. They will be available in about a week's time at the same website where you registered. And that would be strivescan.com/WACAC. I would now like to turn it over to Herbie Walker, who will be leading our session today. Herbie?
Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining our presentation today. This is an honor for us to be able to present this information for you. A lot of students have concerns with financial aid, and we're here to kind of just tell you a little bit about it, give you a little warm-up start. I'm expecting that most of the people here are going to be juniors, and the FAFSA is going to be a very important piece of your college application process next fall. My name is Herbie Walker. I am a board member with the Western Association of College Admissions Counselors, and I am the College Fairs Chair for WACAC, which means that the responsibility for the college fairs in California and Nevada falls on my team. So I personally really want to thank you all for participating today, as it means a lot to all of us. There's a lot of hard work went to putting this on, and this is it's a very rewarding thing that we get to do. So we're going to dive right in. And I have the PowerPoint queued up. We're going to talk today about the FAFSA, CSS Profile, and General Financial Aid. How does it work? Throughout the presentation, we do have Ms. Deanna Kilgore from WACAC, as well as Jeremiah Rakowski from WACAC, who will be moderating our chat. So throughout the entire presentation, they will be able to answer all your questions. And at the end, some of the questions that you guys post, we'll just answer aloud so everybody can hear and get into a little bit more detail if necessary. So please use that chat function throughout the presentation. Getting started. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the FAFSA, which is the backbone of the college application process. The backbone of receiving financial aid within the college application process. The FAFSA is a federal application that is available for U.S. citizens to apply for Pell grants, Stafford loans, and as well as SEOG grants that are available for certain demographics. The FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. This is the one application that every college, well, you're going to fill out one time, hopefully, and every college is going to get that information that throughout the fall. So you fill out the FAFSA for 2020, 2021, and then you're going to add your colleges to your FAFSA so that they all receive the same application. But the FAFSA opens up on October 1st. And one thing that I get a lot from my students is that once the application opens, I get these questions and emails saying that, oh, is it too late to apply? Is it too late to apply? October 1st is just the day the application opens. Often what happens is the priority deadline often gets mixed in with the FAFSA application opening date, and those are two different things. As every college is going to have their own priority deadlines. I can speak for Nevada, where our universities here have priority deadlines that could be either in early November or could be in February. So whether you fill out, depending on the timeline of when you fill out the application, the earlier you send it typically means you have a better chance for receiving more grant and aid, but it is 100% related to the university that you're applying for. So make sure that when you're applying for the FAFSA, that you're keeping in mind the university deadlines at the local level for you. Every college and university is going to require the FAFSA if you want any sort of financial aid. The sometimes universities does use the FAFSA to determine some merit aid, but that's not as common. But as far as financial aid, and those are two different categories. Merit aid is going to be money that you received for academic performance, or it could be within music performance as well, certain scholarships in that regard. But financial aid is 100% based on your income, your family's income. So in order to qualify for any money that the university could hold for students that are have high financial need, they're going to need a fully completed FAFSA in order to claim some of that money. You do have to add each university to the FAFSA. There is a application max of 10 colleges at a time. So when you do see this, when you fill out your FAFSA next next October, you're going to have a list of 10 slots that you could put colleges for the FAFSA, and all those 10 schools will get your aid, get your aid information. Now, there is a way to have more than 10 colleges receive your FAFSA. What typically you would do is that after you submit your first 10 colleges, usually wait about a week, then you can delete those colleges and add another group of colleges onto your FAFSA. This is important to note, going back to what I said in the beginning, that your timeline is absolutely essential here. So if you are going to apply, let's say you're applying to 15 universities, you need to make sure that the schools that have the early financial aid deadline are going to be in that first round of where you send your FAFSA out to. And also remember that the FAFSA needs to be resubmitted every year. Every October, the application is going to open for the upcoming school year. And this is where you're going to, and this is where the universities are going to kind of follow up and make sure that you still qualify for aid. Most times, things don't change too much year after year, but nonetheless, this is something that is required for the university to resubmit your parents' financial information. So the federal government provides more than $120 billion in grants, loans, and work study funds each year to help pay for college or career school. To apply for this aid, you must complete the free application for federal student aid. Also, state governments and many colleges and career schools use your FAFSA information for their award. I mentioned earlier about being mindful of deadlines that the individual universities held. As for my California residents, I believe it's March 2nd is the priority deadline to submit your FAFSA for the Cal States and the UCs. So for you current juniors right now, when you're filling out the FAFSA next year, make sure that your application is 100% complete by March 2nd. Now, if there are any seniors in here this year looking to go to a Cal State or a UC, it's not too late, so it's not a cutoff either. So that it's just a priority deadline that you need to be mindful of. Now, I mentioned this earlier, some schools won't consider you for merit scholarships based on academic achievement until you've submitted a FAFSA. So you still need to complete one. Now, if your family's in a fortunate situation where you don't believe you need financial aid, that is okay. You still need to submit your FAFSA, where with the FAFSA is going to pull your tax records and put it right into the application. It's fairly straightforward in that regard, but it's still necessary to complete in order to qualify to certain states' schools for aid. Now, when you're preparing to apply for the FAFSA, it's going to be a lot faster if you have your FSA username. So when you first sign up for the FAFSA, when you go to the main website, and hopefully the facilitators can put the FAFSA website on the chat, which is www.fafsa.ed.gov. You're going to get an option to create an FSA ID. That means your federal student aid ID. You and one of your parents are going to need to have both of this in order to verify your identity and complete the FAFSA application. So when you have the FSA ID, You're going to need your social security number. You're going to need your alien registration number if it applies, federal tax information, any records of untaxed income, cash savings amount, and any investments as well. When you're walking through the FAFSA, all these pieces are going to be vital in having a fully completed application. There is such a thing to have an incomplete FAFSA application, even though you can sometimes submit it if you forgot to put income in a certain area. The application doesn't necessarily kick back, but you have to wait for the university to let you know what information was missed, and then that could delay you in getting your aid when you have to go back and fix your FAFSA. So it's important to try to get all this information early on so that you can finish it in possibly one sitting. That FSA ID is going to be your is going to be a username and password once you put in your social security number and prove your identity. When you complete the FAFSA, that FSA ID is going to be required to actually submit it. There are a few ways to submit the form. We are going to talk about the electronic form, as this is vastly the majority of students are going to use this method to complete the FAFSA. But for those who need it, there is a physical mail-in application that you can get from their website. And also your college or university can do an electronic submission. This is very rare, but so I wouldn't necessarily rely on that. I would assume everybody here is going to do the electronic form. Again, I can't stress this enough. Be mindful of the state and local deadlines for FAFSA. That, again, every university has a different deadline. Even if you're going to a trade school, they have their own deadlines as well. You may also retrieve and transfer your tax information automatically using the IRS data retrieval tool. That tool is going to present itself in the application process of the FAFSA. So I think when you get about halfway through, when you put your name as a student, then you put your parents' information and household information, you'll eventually get to an option of, would you like to electronically transfer your tax information to your FAFSA? You're going to want to say yes to this. It makes the whole process a lot easier, and you're less likely to get flagged for what we call in industry is verification. When you manually punch in your tax return, what can happen is that the universities may ask you for additional paperwork to prove your income, and that just delays the process a little bit. And when we're talking about FAFSA, we want to get things moving pretty smooth, because the faster the university gets your FAFSA information, the faster they can disperse aid. So this is going to be the process of the FAFSA. After you submit your FAFSA and you have your IRS data transferred in, you're going to receive an email within a few days letting you know that the application was processed. So you're going to need to be on the lookout in your email. Parents, I don't like to have to say this, but if you do need to help your students monitor emails. In my experience, working at a school, working with many students, many seniors, emails get missed, and very important time-sensitive emails get missed. So work something out ahead of time, I recommend, with your student, as far as periodically checking emails, just looking for important time-sensitive news regarding the application process for colleges and for the FAFSA. After you receive that confirmation email, university may reach out and ask for additional information. This is where I was talking about the verification forms. Sometimes they want to get detailed information of who lives in the home. Sometimes they want, if your parents have a business on the side, they may ask for any paperwork on that. So just be mindful of what you may receive from the university. For the first-time applicants, you're going to receive an aid offer. Again, this is going to probably take a couple of weeks. Most universities are not going to send financial aid results instantly, but you will have a pretty good idea of what you will qualify for, as at the end of the FAFSA, it will tell you if you qualify for a Pell Grant or student loans. But then you'll receive a formal letter from your university that you're applying to that's going to say, we received your FAFSA, and these are the these are the monies that you're going to receive. Make sure you review and compare your offers and decide which school to attend is based on the student's net cost and how the school suits your needs. And remember, you can apply for multiple schools with the same FAFSA, but some universities will provide additional funding on top of what is traditionally given on the FAFSA. If you're renewing your FAFSA, you'll receive an aid offer from your school, again, telling you how much how much aid you're going to receive, and then that financial aid is going to hit your account. Now, when the financial aid hits your account, what's going to happen is that your FAFSA, your student loans, anything that comes from the federal or the university level are going to go to your direct costs first. That means tuition, room and board, any campus fees, books and anything that's externally charged is not typically going to be automatically deducted from your FAFSA when you go to school. But if you received let's say you received $10,000 in grant and aid, and your tuition was $8,000, you're going to see that the university is going to pay that $8,000 off first. Anything that's remaining can be used for you to buy books and any needed supplies for school. So the federal Pell Grant, this is the most popular form of financial aid that you'll receive. Federal Pell Grant usually are awarded only to undergraduate students that have not earned a bachelor's degree. So if you're a student if there's anybody here by chance that is considering looking for a Pell Grant for a master's, understand that this is available only for students earning their first degree, and they also qualify financially. And that's going to be your EFC number. Your EFC number is going to show up at the end of your FAFSA application when you see your results, and it's going to be based on your income against many of the other factors that goes into the application, such as how many kids are in the home, any extenuating medical expenses, things like that you'll find out when you complete the application. Amounts can change yearly. However, the current maximum is $6,250 per year for a full-time student. And to qualify for that full $6,250, the student must have an EFC of 0. For my students in California, oftentimes, if you're going to qualify for the Pell Grant, you will qualify for the Cal Grant, which I believe is still available. And for those in Nevada, we have here the Millennium Scholarship, which is not based on the financial aid of your EFC. It is going to be an academic-based scholarship. Both of those dollar amounts, though, will combine with this Pell Grant to be added to your student account. The next form of financial aid you're going to see is the Federal Work-Study Program. This is a need-based program that helps students earn financial funding through campus part-time work. Students may earn up to the amount listed in their financial aid award letter from each school. Students receive a regular paycheck. No funds are deducted from the student's tuition. So I've had students that received a federal work-study, work at the library, campus store. They're usually fairly low-stress jobs. Oftentimes my students are allowed to do homework at their work-study jobs. But what you need to do when you're filling out the FAFSA, make sure that you put down that you're interested in federal work-study. And I will say that federal work-study is one of those items that definitely first come, first serve, because not every university can accommodate all students for federal work-study. There's just not that many jobs. There's just not enough jobs for every student who qualifies for a Pell to get a job. So this is one of those areas where getting your application on time is going to be very, very vital. As the earlier you get it in, the more likely you're going to receive federal work study. The last section, section of funds that you're going to receive, you'll be determined to receive from your FAFSA is going to be student loans. Now, talking about student loans is a touchy subject for many. There's a lot of horror stories out there, and I'm not here to advocate students to take or not take student loans, but I do want to explain and offer a little bit of clarity. When you're filling out your FAFSA, you're going to be offered a subsidized and or unsubsidized loan. What the subsidized loans means that if you borrow $3,500, when you graduate college, you're gonna owe only $3,500. Unsubsidized means that interest is going to add up while you're in college. So if you borrow $2,000, it's going to be $2,000 times the rate of usually is prime interest rate from my observation. So it could be $2,000 times 0.6%. So after you graduate, you'll owe a little bit more than that, $2,000. But there's a cap here. So you really cannot borrow more than about $5,500 per year as a student while you're an undergrad. For the most part, students that need to borrow a subsidized or unsubsidized loan, I found in my experience tend to do okay. Where loans start becoming a nightmare to manage for families is when we start getting a little bit into the Parent Plus loan. And this is where parents and students need to be very discerning and to determine if this is going to be a useful tool for you. I often suggest that to students that if you can't pay for your education without a Parent Plus loan, then you may want to look at your budget and see what other schools may be a little bit more affordable. Everybody has their own budgets and has their own goals and their own ambitions. But if you start creeping into this territory, and then even further, there's private loans that are outside of FAFSA, that's where these nightmare stories comes from. So be very mindful of that when you're going through this process, and ask your school counselor for help if you have more questions. The next application is going to be the CSS Profile. And the CSS Profile is another tool of financial aid that is very necessary, especially for those applying to some of the top universities in the country. It's used by over 400 colleges. And what it is it's an independent audit of your finances. So every school is going to require the FAFSA, but only a smaller percentage are going to require CSS Profile. But the CSS Profile is very involved. And they do get in depth as far as asking, do you own rental property? What's the revenue from there? Do you own any boats? Things like that. They do get into the nuances. And the reason for that is that the schools that do require the CSS Profile, they tend to be very generous when it comes to institutional financial aid. And so this is their way to make sure that there's that every student that is qualifying is truly deserving of those scholarships and aid. Now, why should you apply for the financial aid with the CSS Profile? If your college or university requires it, and your family needs assistance with meeting your college costs, you really do want to fill this out. It's the best way to get money, especially for if you're applying to schools like NYU, USC, Harvard, Stanford, MIT. They're all going to require it. There's a lot more funding in the CSS Profile schools than just completing the FAFSA loan, where the FAFSA is going to get you that Pell grant for $6,500. A CSS Profile for qualifying students you're going to get into the tens of thousands of dollars in aid if you qualify. This also gives you a lot more room to explain extenuating circumstances. For my students this year that I worked with, the parents that were affected by COVID, CSS Profile was truly useful here because it gave ample room to explain the financial situation to of every explain all your financial situation. One student in particular, I remember both because parents were casino workers, both were furloughed, and then eventually one was laid off, and that didn't show in the tax report that went into the FAFSA because FAFSA uses the taxes from 1 year prior, so the numbers aren't 100% up to date. So the CSS profile is going to be super useful in that explaining those extenuating circumstances. What can you expect when completing the application? In most cases, the application will ask questions about you, your parents, information or questions about whether or not you have siblings and your parents' employment, income, savings, or investments. It is comprehensive in nature and it's going to take a lot more time to fully complete, but don't worry, your answers are all saved, so you don't have to worry about anything going missing if you log out. You don't have to finish everything in one sitting. You can spread it out over a couple of days. That's very normal. Sometimes for my families, it could take me about a week to properly finish and submit a CSS profile. College Board as well is always available. They have a online help tool where there's always people on staff ready to answer questions, and it's always been very useful for me when I'm working with my kids. What financial documents will you need? Before filling out the application, it's important that you have your financial aid documents, your financial documents, and your parents' financial documents readily accessible. If your parents file tax returns, you're going to need the actual physical paper, as this will not draw from the IRS retrieval tool. And they do ask certain line items specifically. They'll say, please input the numbers from line 32 from your tax return. It will ask you to provide family information from 2 years prior. So CSS Profile does a lot better at kind of seeing patterns and trends. So you are going to probably need two copies of your past tax returns to answer all the questions appropriately. You should also expect to answer a few questions about your parents' income from this current year. There may be some questions about anticipated income as well. If your parents have a job where they get paid on a bonus structure, they may ask about that. The purpose of this is to give financial aid officers a better idea of your family's financial circumstances over a longer period of time. W-2 forms and records of income earned in the current year, records of untaxed income, benefits for current and previous tax years, current bank statements, mortgage statements, records of savings, stocks, bonds, trusts, all of this could be asked within the application. Now, remember, I don't want everybody to be spooked about the CSS profile. It is a long application. It's not necessarily complicated, but they do ask for a lot of information. And most of the times, the issues I've seen is that students just don't have that info readily available. You do have to pay to submit each CSS profile. You're required to pay your initial application, which includes one college, and that report is $25, and additional reports are going to be $16. You can use credit debit card. The website's super secure, so you don't have to worry about that. There are fee waivers. Now, within the College Board, if you qualified for a SAT waiver, it should transfer over here to as well automatically from the students I worked with last season. When they use an SAT waiver, just kind of rolled right in. If you didn't use an SAT waiver, there's a process that will present itself on where you can apply for a CSS profile waiver as well. Oh, also, there isn't a limit about the colleges that you can apply for, but I think at a certain point, for the fee waivers, I think it's about you get 10 for free, I believe. So you can always submit your application to more schools if necessary. So for eligible students from low-income backgrounds, application fees are going to be waived. You'll learn if you're eligible for a fee waiver, but the application before you have to pay, but the application does need to be submitted before it can be determined. A lot of times your school counselor can also help with this. If you receive free or reduced lunch at your school, your school counselor can verify that as well and help get this fee waiver process moved along much faster. Who's eligible for a fee waiver? Any first-year undergraduate student whose parents lived in the United States is considered for a CSS profile fee waiver under certain conditions. Students who used a SAT waiver may also receive a CSS profile waiver. Students must log into the CSS profile with the same credentials that you logged in for the SAT. Students who didn't use an SAT waiver can still qualify, but as a general guideline, if your family income is going to need to fall around $45,000 or less. Students who are orphans and wards of the state under the age of 24 are also automatically eligible for a fee waiver. Okay, we have just a few more slides left, so we're getting towards the end, and then we're going to get into some Q&A. If your parents are divorced or separated, we recommend, College Board recommends completing the CSS profile with your custodial parent's information first, or the parent that you lived with the most throughout the year. Some colleges may also require the profile, CSS profile of your non-custodial parent. So that could be like a step parent. That could be your other parent or the biological parent that you don't reside with. Your non-custodial parent will need to create a College Board account and fill out their own CSS profile. So again, that's another layer that can take additional time. So again, just be mindful of all your deadlines. You have to list all your parents, including step parents, on the CSS profile. Whose information should you provide if they are divorced or separated? Let's see. Oops, sorry, this duplicated. So right here. So this is what the portion of the application is going to look like. You're going to see where you can kind of click off which parents that you're actually with and those who you're going to actually provide. So it could be that you lived with, if you had 50-50 custody, parents have 50-50 custody, this would be one of those areas where you lived with parent A. So it could be Howard Board, but you're going to use the income from Mary Smith. But this is going to kind of fall into that perfect 50-50 category if the parent is, if your parents are not living together. How would you know if your non-custodial parent needs to complete the CSS profile? You'll be prompted in the application to share your parent's email address after you've selected your colleges. You may add that information on your dashboard after submitting your CSS profile. The College Board will use that email address to contact your parent with information about filling out the CSS profile. Your other parent will not have the ability to select colleges, and it would only be you. So so you'll be able to get a little bit of a tracker. It's going to clear once you put their email, it's going to say if it's submitted or not. Now, what if you have no contact with your non-custodial parent? I've seen this a lot where we'll have a student that would live with one parent and they haven't seen or heard of the other parent for an extended period of time, extended few years. So what you do in here is that you're going to have to fill out the profile waiver request for non-custodial parent. It's available on the CSS Profile website, and it should be submitted directly to each college requesting the CSS profile. Each college will determine if the application requirement can be waived. Additional information to support your request may be required and should be submitted directly to the college. If you're in this situation, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you have your high school counselor help you with this section. And the reason is your high school counselor may understand your situation better and could also write a supplemental letter of support. And they could also provide school records that would say that Sarah's only have one custodial parent for the last 4 or 5 years in our school's database. And so reaching out to your counselor, having a good relationship with them could go a long way here. Now, we're getting to the end here. We have about one more slide. Information for independent students. Many colleges and many colleges provide institutional financial aid to independent graduate and professional students, even if you're a student who meets the criteria to be considered independent for federal aid. Some college and programs may still require parent information from you or on the CSS profile application. If your parents' sections are displayed, one or more of the colleges or institutions that you're applying to are going to require that info. Because institutions will take this information into account when deciding how much to award, it is necessary for you to fill out these sections. Questions regarding application policies for independent students should be directed to your financial aid office. This is a very tricky situation. Most students who are going to be qualified as independent are going to be students who are ward of the state, are in the foster system. So those students are going to have a much easier time here. But let's say you've just been living on your own, you turned 18, you have your own job and you're just making things work on your own. They're going to require a lot more proof that you are truly independent. They may ask for pay stubs, bank statements personally from you as well. And not that you're not independent, but they need to have a little bit more proof in order to give you financial aid. Now, here are the official websites for both the FAFSA and the CSS profile. Please be mindful, especially for the FAFSA, that you are going to the .gov website. There are quite a few fraudulent websites out there that look like a FAFSA application, but they are not. So make sure you take a screenshot and you're going to these sites accordingly. Now we're going to open things up to Q&A. So let's see here. Just give me 1 minute. Okay, someone would like me to go back to the last slide? Absolutely. Here you go. So there's one question here. We have a sophomore student. When should we start this application? Can we create the account now and keep it ready? As a sophomore, you're not going to need to start the application that early, honestly. You can practice. I think they have like you can download like the paper version and see the application to see exactly what questions are going to be asked. But typically, there really isn't a reason to do it before October 1st of your senior year. What are the income limits for the Cal grant? I don't know the exact amount. Hopefully, I'm gonna, maybe Deanna or Jeremiah might know that number. So we'll circle back. Should juniors have this application ready this year? Juniors do not have to do the FAFSA for this right now in this spring semester. When you become senior this fall, that is when you're going to worry about the application. And that's when you're going to start creating your FAFSA account, your FSA ID for you and your parent. You can create the FSA ID early, probably as soon as you start as your senior year, but the FAFSA, you won't be able to do anything until October 1st. I read that FAFSA is undergoing some changes through recent legislation. Can you speak to what will be changing and when? From my understanding, they are working on making the FAFSA easier, and that's something that that policymakers are always working on. As far as will there be more or less aid, it's always possible Congress will increase federal Pell Grant funding. That's something that's always where NACAC even our large our national organization is always advocating for. But we really won't know and anything until we get closer to the fall. I think it's after Congress's after summer session, I believe. And I believe as well for Cal, I don't know when they vote on changes on that, but typically it's always to make it easier. That's definitely going to be the case for the FAFSA, is to try to streamline and simplify the application. This is a really good question. How does this affect early admissions or early admissions decisions? So if you're a student applying early admissions or ED, which means your application has to get in pretty much early November, you have to finish the FAFSA and CSS profile much sooner than everyone else. They'll have different priority deadlines. It could be up until December 1st for some schools. It's going to vary, but it does for students that are going to apply early. Your whole timeline gets moved up. And if you're a student that's considering QuestBridge, the FAFSA CSS is going to be a huge factor there, and you're going to have to get a lot of this documentation done before November. FAFSA is going to be filled out during your senior year, the fall of senior year. QuestBridge is a program that serves low-income students to help them find not to help them. It's a special program that's partnering with several universities across the country, mostly top 50, top 100 schools. They have a separate application process in which you can apply to multiple schools at one time. And if you're admitted as a QuestBridge scholar, you're guaranteed a certain amount of financial aid and also academic support if you're admitted. How do merit-based grants work with the FAFSA? So we have about 1 minute left. Merit-based aid is going to depend 100% on the college. So the FAFSA just determines how much money, it just determines your income and determines your EFC, but a university they may just want your FAFSA just to verify who you are in order to qualify for merit-based aid. Every university has a different method of doing this.
Kirby, I would just, one thing, merit-based scholarships versus what they might get from FAFSA at a school like mine at American, which is a private institution. If we award you a merit scholarship, that's factored into the need that we're meeting for a family, and we meet 100% demonstrated need. So we won't add more additional aid from the FAFSA and the CSS profile, so it goes over the cost of tuition, if that makes sense. So it does factor in kind of our total package.
Thank you, Jeremiah. As Jeremiah said, American University, that they provide full needs. So a university that's going to fall into that category is more than likely going to have a very similar response. What is a Parent Plus loan? Very good question. That'll be my last question because we're out of time. A Parent Plus loan is a loan that your parents are going to have to take out in order to pay for your education. These are federally backed loans, but they don't have the same repayment terms as a student level loan. The Plus loan does allow a parent to borrow pretty high amount of money to help pay for their tuition. And usually the interest rate's a lot better than what you can get at a bank. But in my experience, if you're looking at Parent Plus loans, you may be over budget. So just be very cautious about doing that. But thank you all for asking these awesome questions. I'm going to hand things back over to Jennifer, who's going to close out the presentation. But again, us here at WACAC really would like to thank you all for coming and participating today.
Thank you so much to our panelists today, to Herbie for leading such a wonderful presentation, and to Deanna and Jeremiah for doing a great job with getting questions answered. We know there's so many questions for families and about this whole process, so I hope that everyone enjoyed getting us great knowledge and a good starting point as you move forward. So thank you again to our panelists for presenting so much knowledge and support. We also want to thank everyone who's attending today or watching this replay. We're so glad that you were able to spend part of your day with us and gain this awesome information. When you close your window, there's going to be a link to a very quick 4-question survey. We would appreciate any feedback that you can provide us. Also, this is just one of many sessions that are being hosted as a part of programming. So please be sure to sign up for additional sessions. In about a week's time, you'll be able to find this panel recording as well as all of the other session recordings at that same website where you sign up, strivescan.com/WACAC. So thank you again, everyone, and best of luck in your college search and decision journey. Goodbye.